Hello.
What's your most emotional gaming moment?
Well, it's a difficult one because I'm a big crybaby. I cry at movies all the time, but for gaming, I've never really had that reduced to tears moment. It's more a crippling sense of dread, because I think games do emotional moments well, but they also do sort of existential crisis well in sort of tapping into that. And it was the best narrative of the year, What Remains of Edith Finch, that I was playing last year, which is great. And that's like an emotional game from a narrative perspective. You have like it's literally about people dying in horrible, in fantastical ways. And while that was deeply kind of moving and emotional, I mean, you have like one horrible bit where like a baby literally drowns in the bath, and it's done in this kind of surreal fashion. You're like, Jesus Christ. It was more what it was tapping into when it comes to stories, and the sort of the fatalism of that game was really kind of punishing, because it's all about a grandmother and the stories that she tells her children. It's sort of like unraveling whether there really is a curse and the things are happening to this family because they kind of either deserve it or they're wrapped up in something supernatural, or if that's tapping into something kind of deeply human. And it's like, sorry, the stories we tell just kind of rationalize these horrific acts that just keep happening. And like, I think that was what really got me, that kind of like the fatalism of it all. Because I mean, I live my day-to-day life assuming something bad is going to eventually happen and trying to do that, like make the most of every moment, and sort of, I don't know, it kind of entraps you in a way. And I've never sort of seen a game sort of delve into that as well as this did, and like the anxiety around that, and sort of just the constant kind of day-to-day fear that something bad might and probably will happen, and whether that's sort of like something you have to live with, and like the sort of, I don't know, it's difficult because the saddest bits in those games aren't the actual events. It's the watching Edith Finch as a character come to terms that that's probably going to happen to her, and what she has to do in that time frame to sort of live the most of her life, live the most life, be who she needs to be. And that's crippling, man. That's like, that really got to me afterwards, and it was something that really stayed with me, away from, it didn't sort of reduce me to tears, but it's something that just felt so relevant and felt so resonant to like what we go through sort of like daily when you're sort of living with that kind of, it's like a shadow overhead almost, and it's just kind of like, it's just bad. But then also in that game you get to fall down a hill as a shark, and it's like, how do I reconcile these things? Because that's awesome, and then, oh, it's crippling dread! And yeah, so that was it.
It's a tough act to follow, this lot, because I have been racking my brain about what to talk about here, and it's just, I've not played stuff that has that kind of emotional weight to it, at least unless I'm just being really thick and I can't think of one. But you know, there's the childhood memories I mentioned last time about beating Streets of Rage. Like that was a big thing for me and my friend, because you know we were splitting up for the first like proper time for 15 years. We'd known each other since we were kids, and it's like I'm trying to think about where to go with this. And I think the one thing I can think of isn't even me. It was my mum, and it's gonna be a broken down record because it's about my Mega Drive that I have, because the Mega Drive I own is my dad's, and my mum bought it for him in Christmas 1993, I want to say. My dad went out on the piss on Christmas Eve, came home, and then on Christmas morning my mum walked into the bathroom to find him in a cold bath, dropped the Mega Drive in front of him, went, "Happy f***ing Christmas," and walked out of the room. But, you know, my mum said that she remembers sitting and watching my dad play Sonic the Hedgehog, the first one, and then obviously my dad introduced me to the Mega Drive when I was a kid, because that was my first experience of video games. And then last year when Sonic Mania came out on PS4, when my parents came to visit me here in Newcastle, only like a week or so after it released, and so I was like, "Dad, you know, you've got to try this, because it's so much like it was, you know, they did such an amazing job with it." And then we were sat playing it, my dad was playing on the PS4, I was sat next to him, my mum was sat on the other sofa, and she was just looking at us, and she just sort of went, this is how I remember it, like back when you were a kid. Like, you know, although it's kind of changed, it's, you know, it's your dad playing it and you're showing him it. and that just took my mum straight back to the 90s and when the Mega Drive was king. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to channel how she was feeling because it wasn't me feeling it, but that's kind of what I have in that regard, I guess.
Oh God, so yeah, like there's a lot of them. There's we've talked about these quite a bit in the office because every now and then you come across something where it just knocks you for six. It's just sort of like, well, everything was going all right and then someone died or whatever. One of the oldest ones and most talked about is Final Fantasy VII and Edith. But for me, and I have to go into spoilers which we flagged, but it's Celeste, which just came out this year. The end of that game, I was a raw person, and not in a bad way, just in a completely emotionally drained, like, oh God, I'm never gonna feel this ever again kind of way. So Celeste, if you haven't played it, is all about, you play as this little girl called Madeline, and she's basically trying to climb the mountain of Celeste. And it starts out, you know, it's a side-scrolling platform where it's all pixel and delicious and it's all lovely. And it's just, you know, you just go on your way and you try and make your way up the mountain and you encounter a bunch of different people, whether it's this old grandma that laughs at you, and sort of like, she sort of represents like the older generations being like, why would you even try? Just stick to your post, don't worry about it. And you meet a bunch of different people and basically you slowly find out that the mountain pretty much represents like all of Madeline's like inner struggles, everything that she comes up against, and it's a metaphor. It's like, you know, the whole point of overcoming the mountain is to overcome whichever struggle you're up against in real life. And that manifests in the game by her having like a shadow self. And basically across the whole game you encounter the shadow self a bunch of times. The shadow self mocks you and sort of insults you. It's like, why are you even trying? Like, you can't do this. And, you know, it points out that basically Madeline struggled with a lot of things in the past. And you can make allegories to, like, you know, depression or anxiety, mental struggle, things like that. The game never spells those out too specifically because it should be more of a relatable message by not being so specific, but because of that, I started relating or you know, taking very close relatives that I have that are going through these things, and I just started putting them onto Madeline, and all I wanted was for it to be all right, for it to get through, and like, even as I'm talking about it now, it's a thing. And so, like, as you start getting through that game, you know, she comes up against like her shadow self, and eventually she learns to talk to it. And it's such a worthwhile therapeutic way to deal with anxiety and depression and mental struggle and all the things like that, is to harness them, because you can't cure it, or at least not yet. And people are like figuring out how to get through these kind of things. And like, eventually she learns to just be one with her shadow self and embrace like the idea of thinking situations through or thinking things through, and just all those things that anxious mindsets bring us that usually drag us down. You just embrace them and you go that maybe I should think things through, but eventually my better self will win out and I can get through these things together. So eventually she learns to work with her worst aspects and she climbs the mountain. And that final rush, it's like the last sort of 5 to 7 minutes of the game where the score is just like really high and it's great. It's really positive. She's working together. Her shadow self is apologizing, saying like, I thought you were too naive, but I never thought you were strong enough. And she's saying, look, I didn't understand what you were. I just needed to work with you. We both needed to figure ourselves out. And like I said, I've got a lot of close relatives that I can map that onto. So when she finally got to the top of the mountain and just did it, I was in bits. I was absolutely gone, and I just was like, yeah, like it's good, like it's a positive thing, but like I've never been that emotionally raw in a game, maybe ever. And so yeah, that.
So yeah, like I say, I'm quite delicate. I'm okay admitting that. I cry quite a lot. Cried at the start of Last of Us, for example. But the most absolutely ruined I've ever been. And even more ruined than that, dragon cancer, which was, you know, tough. For some reason, playing through To the Moon absolutely destroyed me. Wow, I'm doing so well. So I stream on Twitch, and for some reason, this game was a gift. It was a recommendation. I had never heard of it. So I thought, you know, thank you so much for the gift. I'm going to play this on stream so that we can enjoy it together. Oh God, what a mistake. But no, not exactly, no. I don't regret it. In fact, it is one of the most emotionally powerful just experiences I've ever had, and it's because I shared it. So just for some context, To the Moon is it's like a pixel art game. It's really, really simple artwork, but the story is just incredible. It's all about two scientists who visit a dying man they have this technology to be able to go into his memories and sort of alter them. What they do is they basically fulfill people's dying wishes. And so he's hired them, or his maid, or his daughter? Sorry, it was a while ago. His associates hired them to fulfill his dying wish, which was to go to the moon. Basically, I won't explain the whole thing. You should play it. If you're feeling brave, you should play it. But it was, in order to fulfill that wish, they basically had to erase his entire memory of his wife. And because every time they tried to send him to astronaut school, something would stop him, and that would be his love of his wife, because she had autism or Asperger's, something like that. And he finally goes to astronaut school, finally makes it, and he's in school, and it's just destiny about who walks in the door, but his wife. So in the end, he gets to go to the moon, but with her as well, and it just ruins me. It just absolutely ruins me, because we know, like, in real life, that didn't happen. I mean, they had a long and happy life together. She died, unfortunately, a little bit before him, but it's not even, like, talking about it, it's not even that sad. There's much, like, wow, what a game.
See, this one's tough because you have to talk about a really depressing subject. So there's an indie game out there called That Dragon Cancer, and I've unfortunately lost quite a few family members to cancer, so it was an immediate thing that I knew was going to sort of hit quite an emotional button with me. But I didn't expect it to be as well told as it was. I thought that it was just going to be like they do in Oscar season, where it was just going to be a cheap hit and you were just going to feel all schmaltzy and then that was it. But I think it's just the aggressive unfairness of that disease that's really highlighted in that game, because it's not about sort of the massive moments like the saying goodbye on a bed as you float into the ether. It's not like that. It's the sort of repetitive, boring finality of cancer that's highlighted in this game. And I don't know, people sometimes go into that sort of game and expect it to be like a thing where they're just going to be crying all the way through, but it wasn't for me. I think it was more of a depression that led to something that like cracked within me, and by the end of it I was in tears, because the ending scene is possibly one of the most powerful moments in gaming for me, because it's seeing the it's actually harder to do than I thought it was going to be. No, that's all right. I mean, it's silly because, like I say, it's just unfair. Just like seeing the kid from his perspective, and everything just goes white at the end, and it's just a thing of it all just disappearing. The reality for this young boy who never got a chance, that just sucks, because it happens every single day, and people don't get special send-offs like this guy did. People just have to put up with it, and then you just have to carry on. And I think that's the sort of moment that it hits the hardest, when you're just like, reality is crushingly there for you when that game ends, and then you realise all the stuff that has happened, like who it's happening to day in, day out. And it's hard. So yeah, That Dragon Cancer and life are the most emotional points for me, definitely.